Welcome to From the Bayou to the World. We're going right in the heart of Cajun cooking. We're doing roux tonight, all about roux, what it does, how you can make it. You don't want to miss this. The coffee's on. Come on in. Welcome back to From the Bayou to the World. I'm Curt. This is my kitchen. Come on in and have a seat. This is a new show. We're going to be talking about Cajun food, how it came to be, the history of Cajun food, where it's going, where it is today, how you can make your best Cajun meals, and what's going to happen to Cajun food, some of the fusion, some of the things that's going on with other cuisines. We are a melting pot after all. We got to thank our sponsors, Guillory's Greatest Food Makers of Louisiana Love. If you're not cooking with Louisiana Love, your roux-based dish that we're going to talk about is not as good as it could be. So there's that. So tonight we're going to talk about roux. What is roux? You all know what it is, right? Roux is flour and oil. Or is it flour and water, or is it just flour? Wait, what is roux? Well, roux is a generic term for a thickening agent that originated in French cooking. What makes Cajun roux different is it's dark. And that probably happened as an accident. Cajun people got here 1791, 1792. They didn't have a whole lot of civilization, so they were pretty busy people. And it's been speculated that Cajun roux was probably a blonde roux that went a little too far, and somebody used it anyway and said, hey, this tastes pretty good. And now we have one of the cornerstones of our cuisine. So you have wet roux, dry roux, raw roux, peanut butter roux. There's so much going on. Roux is simply toasting flour. So how you toast it is what makes the difference. Traditionally, we use 1 part oil to 1 part flour, and we cook it at a temperature that starts to turn and toast and cook that flour. It takes about 460 degrees to get us to where we're going to be. And if you look right here, you're going to see pretty much the 4 stages of roux. So starting right here, we have raw roux. And this is simply just oil and flour mixed together. Now, this can be used to thicken a liquid, water or stock or gravy or whatever. The real problem with it is it's going to give off a lot of oil, and you have to cook it a long time after you add it because it's raw flour. The next one is the same thing, and you see the color is very close. This has only been cooked about 5 or 6 minutes, and that starts the process of browning. It starts just a little bit of that flavor, but what it really does is it gets the raw flavor of the flour out, so you could use this more readily if you don't want that color, but why wouldn't you want that color? The third one is what we commonly call peanut butter roux. And I did something intentionally to show you something. If you come in, and man, if you come in and get tight on this, there is some specks in here, okay? So what those specks came from is not stirring enough. And a little bit of the roux stuck to the bottom, and when you stirred, it came up with those little specks. And normally that's fine. It'll cook out. But here's the problem. Those specks do not like to be alone. So they will attract more solids to stick to them, which introduces the possibility of burning even more. So we're going to talk about how to stir, how often to stir, and all the rest of it in a little bit. But that's kind of what happens when you're a little inattentive. But we would use this roux for something like étouffée or a light roux base, maybe a smothered chicken or something like that. And then the last one is the Holy Grail. This is what we go for. This is dark roux, Cajun dark roux, right? So it takes about 30 minutes to get from here to here. 1 part oil, 1 part flour. And I say 1 part oil, I really mean 1 part fat. So you could use animal fat. You could use any type of seed oil, vegetable oil. You kind of don't want to use beef tallow because beef tallow is solid at room temperature, and it's not soft solid, it's hard solid. So you would have a very, very stiff, hard roux. But hog lard would be fantastic. You can use chicken fat, I imagine, if you wanted to. That would be something pretty interesting. What you can't use to get here is whole butter. And the reason why you can't use whole butter is because whole butter has solids in it. And those solids burn at about 320 degrees. And like I mentioned earlier, it's 460 degrees to get here. So that's a problem. That butter will burn. So what you can use, if you want that butter's flavor, if you want a butter flavor, you could use something called ghee, which is just clarified butter. You could buy it or you could make it yourself. Very easy. And once the butter is clarified, that fat can go up to 480 degrees before it starts to smoke. So you'd have a little bit of a variance there. You could get it much closer to this dark roux. So why do we like this so much? Why is it brewed? Why do we like it so much? Because it tastes fantastic. There really is nothing that tastes like dark roux, like a stew, a gumbo, fricassee, anything like. There's really nothing like it. And we put it in a lot of things. If you read one of the packages of your favorite premium rice dressing mixes, you'll see that they use roux in it. We put a little bit of roux in our sauce because to take the bite off of the tomato product that's in there. We use it as much as we can because it tastes really good and it does a lot of things. But one of the chief things it does is it thickens liquids. So we have flavor component and then we have a texture component. And the way it does that is, so I'm going to use these green onions as a guide. The proteins in the roux are kind of like strands. If you just kind of loosely have these green onions just out like this, they kind of hang around, they may be this close, maybe not. But the gaps in between the protein strands in the roux are tight enough to where it doesn't let a water molecule in. So we need something to make that happen. We need some violence. Okay, and when I say violence, we need boiling water. So we have to get that water agitated, those molecules moving so hard that they penetrate that web, the protein web, and get locked inside. And when one gets locked inside, the heat makes that protein molecule a little gummy, a little wiggly, and it invites another one inside, another one, and then they start to stick together. And before you know it, you have a web of these protein chains that are thickening the liquid for us. A lot of sciencey stuff, but that's kind of how it works. And that gives us richness and body. It carries the flavor of not only the dark roux, but of everything else we have in the pot. That's why we use it. That's what it is. And that's kind of where it came from. So I tell you what, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk some more about roux, how to use it. We're going to talk about our friend dry roux here and how it comes into play. And then we're working our way to one of my favorite things in the world, and that's meatball stew. We're going to see you in a couple minutes. Come on back. Welcome back to From the Bayou to the World. I'm Curt. Come on in. We're talking about roux, that Cajun staple that's the cornerstone of so many of our incredible dishes in South Louisiana and Cajun food, Creole food. So last segment, we talked about what we're going to call wet roux. That's equal parts fat and flour that are cooked to a certain degree of doneness. And we showed you the degrees of doneness. We all love dark roux. Of course, peanut butter roux. We all love a good etouffee as well. So let's talk about dry roux. What's dry roux? Dry roux is exactly what it sounds like. It's toasted flour without any media. So no fat. So why would I want to do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. There's no fat in it, so you don't have the calories. It decreases the chance of you burning yourself, kinda, because you're not splashing, you're not sloshing around 460 degree oil. But there's some technique involved. So here, and look, you could still have authentic Cajun food without having a wet roux. And here's a terrific product right here. There may or may not be Louisiana loving this product. I don't know. There may or may not. We'll see. But this is a product by a friend of mine, Drew Barra, and it's called C'est Tout Stew. and he used to make a Seitu dehydrated Cajun Trinity. So we got together and we created this, and this is a real. If you want real Cajun stew, you got it all in one bag right here. So basically, you add water to this and cook it, and boom, it has your vegetables in it, your seasoning, and it has your roux in it. But if you look right here, this roux is the same color that's in this package, but neither of those are this color. So how do we get from here to here? Something strange happens whenever you wet roux. It gets real dark. And I'm going to show you right here. I'm going to have a little bit of water in this cup, and it's a white cup. So I'm going to just drop a little bit of this in here, and we'll give it a quick stir. And you can see, and I'm going to stop right here just to show you the point. The part that's still powdery is light, but look underneath. Look how dark that is just by getting it wet. So that's part of the trick of making dry roux. So I make dry roux in the microwave. I use a glass, a heat-proof glass measuring cup like Pyrex, and I put 3 cups of just regular old AP flour in there, AP all-purpose flour, and I cook it. I start at 3 minutes, then I take it out and stir it, and then I do it another 3 minutes. But I decrease the time, because as it gets hot, I don't want this thing. It's a train. It's like a train. I don't want it to get carried away. I want to control it. The other thing, if you're doing that, you have to consider is when you take that glass out, you need to have either a silicone mat or a dish towel folded or something like that. Even though it's shockproof glass, the temperature variance is so great, it will shatter that vessel. Ask me how I know. But just like wet roux, dry roux does something called carryover cooking. So it's carryover cooking. Carryover cooking means you have to anticipate how dark it's going to get and stop a little bit before that, because it holds so much heat that even though you take it off of the fire, out of the microwave, it's going to continue to cook, another 2 or 3 shades darker. So I didn't get from here to here, but this was probably this color when I stopped cooking it. Maybe a shade darker, and then it just carried over. You keep stirring it, it carries over. Same thing with dry roux. I'm going to stop to get to this color. I'm going to quit cooking it about this shade, maybe a little bit darker, and then it'll carry over. But I have to take into consideration it being hydrated. Once it's hydrated, it's going to darken so much in color. So a little bit of a practice right here, but flour is not expensive, and you can do it. Just don't burn yourself. Hey, when you come back, speaking of burning yourself, we're going to talk about safety. Cooking roux is a pretty dangerous business. We don't just have violence in the pot. Sometimes we have violence cooking the roux. So come on back in a couple minutes, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to try and keep you from getting some pot marks on you like I got. See you in a couple minutes. Hey, welcome back to From the Bayou to the World. I'm Curt. We're talking about roux. And look, I know we don't have the old smell-o-vision, but man, does that smell good in here. So hey, let's talk about a couple things. What flour do we use, right? So there's a bunch of flours. There's bread flour, there's high protein flour, there's high gluten flour, there's cake flour, self-rising flour. Use all-purpose. We just want straight all-purpose flour. Don't use self-rising. Self-rising has baking soda and baking powder in it, and is primarily for baking. And look, it's fine. The problem is you're going to get an off flavor as you cook it. The solids from the baking powder they're going to get a little funky. So just look, straight up AP flour, all-purpose flour. So we mentioned earlier that to get to this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful color, we need to get to about 460 degrees. And that is hot. And so many times you see people cooking, they getting after it. And you can see I'm using a whisk. You can use a spoon. That's fine. If you want to use a spoon, matter of fact, I call this a roux spoon. So I just cut it in like that, because there's 2 things you have to consider. One is, how close is my hand going to be to this heat source? Because this is going to get very, very, very hot as this cooks. So this is a nice long handle. I could be back here. The second thing is does the curvature of this whisk allow me to get into the corner of this pot? Very important. Why? Because that's where the roux is going to hang out. That's where that flour is going to. Flour loves heat. Starch loves heat. So it's going to get to the bottom of the pot, to an area that's not being moved as you stir. It's going to stick there and it's going to burn before you know it. And we're going to start getting our little pieces like we talked about. This spoon is cut like that so you can get all in. The only problem I really have with this spoon is this particular one is a solid spoon. There's no holes in it. A slotted spoon would be better. Why? Because as I'm stirring, I'm not pushing around all that oil and potentially having it splash. It's also why I like a whisk. A whisk more thoroughly mixes the flour without lumps, and I'm able to get in everything. This handle is a little short, but hey, you get used to things. But when you're stirring, don't go crazy. I'm not making a chocolate mousse. I'm not whipping anything. I'm not whipping egg whites into a meringue. I just want it moving. I just want every part of it moving. I want to go around, figure eights. I want to get in those corners, turn it over. I just want it moving. As long as it's moving, it's all cooking at the same rate. And that's what we're going for. We don't want pieces of flour to stick and start cooking at an accelerated rate, because they will burn quickly. And then once I find a spot, and you can tell, because when you are stirring like this, the bottom of that pot's nice and smooth, nice and smooth. If you feel a bump and you feel something kind of give, like you scrape something up, guarantee you that's what happened. You'll have a piece of scorched flour, a clump of it that came up, and now I got a problem. I might have to start over. So yeah, are you going to burn one or two of them if you never made roux? Yeah, of course you will, but that's part of it. Okay, that's how you get here. And look, who makes the perfect roux? I don't know. I ain't made a perfect one yet. I made a bunch of good ones, but I've never made a perfect one. So just go slow, nice and slow, easy. Make sure you get in every part of the pot, and make sure you have a nice thick bottom pot, okay? Cast iron works great. This is stainless steel. Aluminum works great. Just make sure it's a nice thick bottom pot. Why? Because whenever we have the fire on, you see the feathers from the flames? If you have a thin pot, every point that touches is going to be hotter than the surrounding metal around it. It's called a hot spot. Now you're going to have what's called a fire ring. You have a ring inside that pot, and it's going to burn. So a nice thick bottom pot distributes the heat very evenly, and it prevents burning. So hey, time for another little break. When we come back, we got to start cutting vegetables and getting into one of my favorite things in the world. We're going to talk about introducing roux into water. How do you do it? Do you do hot to cold, cold to hot? Do they both have to be hot, both cold, with temperature? We're going to get you right. We'll get you to the promised land where the meatball stew lives. See you in a couple of minutes. Come on back. Welcome back to From the Bayou to the World. I'm Curt. We are cooking meatball stew. We're talking all about roux, and we're building up to my favorite dish in the world, probably yours too. Let's talk about temperature. Does the water need to be hot? Does the roux need to be hot? Does one need to be cold? Do they both need to be the same temperature? There's two schools of thought when it comes to this, and it's that one needs to be hot, one needs to be cold. But like we mentioned earlier, hot roux is about 460 degrees. It'll cool it down. Let's say you let it sit for 10 minutes. It's going to be 375 degrees. Tap water is running about 70 degrees. That is a huge temperature difference. So if I'm adding cold water, room temperature water, into that hot of a roux, that's a lot of violence. It's going to start to sizzle and pop and cuss and fuss and hiss. And I might burn myself. But what really might happen is the roux is going to break. So what that means is the reaction is so violent that the oil starts to separate from the flour particles, and I'm gonna end up with an oil slick on the top of my gravy. So what I like to do is room temperature roux, and you can see right here how it pours. That's perfect. Why? Because there's no dissolving time. When you use When you use roux that's been set up for a long time, it gets real solid and almost chalky. So what happens with that is you got to put it piece by piece into your water and melt each piece, let it get soft each time. Now, what you can do if you're using jar roux, and there's nothing wrong with using jar roux, you can pop it in the microwave for like 15 to 20 seconds, and that'll help soften it up, and that'll get you there too. But you got to be careful because the microwave cooks from the inside out, and if you're not careful, you will get burnt roux in the middle, and you'll find that out whenever you stick the spoon in it. All right, let's chop an onion. I have half an onion and 2 cloves of garlic in there already, but I need another half an onion. It's a medium yellow onion. So listen, you split it. This is the root side. This is the sprout side. You split it down the root side so everything holds together. Curl your fingers in, and you're just going to make some slices like this. You see all the guys go real fast on TV, and that's wonderful. Until you learn how to do that, don't, because you're going to cut yourself. And then you see people that do this. You don't have to do that. Why? Because it's already segmented for you. See? It has little segments for you. So when I do this, it makes cubes. So I don't have to cut it this way. The only reason why they do that is for the edges. On the sides, that makes a more unified piece. But there you go. That's it. That's how you cut an onion. Nothing to it. So if you're going to use this as a scoop, that's fine. Just watch your hand because you're going to cut yourself. I'm going to put it in my little bowl right here along with my meatballs. And we're going to go to the pot. So how much roux? How much do you put? Generally speaking, for a gumbo, you're going to put not quite a pint. So about 2/3 to 3/4 of a pint of roux per gallon of water for a gumbo. That thickness. A stew, like we have right here, and I'm dropping these little meatballs in. A stew, you're going to do a pint and a quarter of roux per gallon of water. Now, I don't have a gallon of water here. And so, Curt, how'd you measure? Sometimes you just know. Okay, so listen, there's a indication called nappe in French. It means whenever you pass your finger, the line stays. See, just like that. That's how it is. So I add a little bit, I stir. I add a little bit, I stir. And when it's looking like the consistency I want, I stop. I could always add more roux, or I could always add more water. So it's not super critical, but just go slow. Add your tablespoon or serving spoon at a time. Let it dissolve. A little bit of Louisiana love, and we on our way to meatball stew. All right, come back. It's all about meatball stew when you come back, and we're going to finish up talking about roux. See you in a couple minutes. So here it is, meatball stew made with our beautiful dark roux. Hey, thank you for joining us for this episode of From the Bayou to the World. We loved having you. Come back next time. We're going deep into Cajun food. There's going to be more Cajun goodness. I'm going to see y'all after a while because I'm fixing to get into that.